So, wow, what a day. First of all, I think we need to thank Eusebius. When we first invited Eusebius, we were overly worried that, as a political analyst, and how's he going to deal with this environmental issue? But I think we can all be thoroughly proud of how he steered us through this very, very difficult ground. This is our life. This is WWF's life. This is the work that we do and the passion we invest. And I'd like to really, really thank you for helping us and respecting and really elevating these issues in such a way on this platform. So thank you once again. So to start wrapping up proceedings for the day, two things are going to happen, two very important things. First of all, we're going to invite Mr. Saliem Fakir, who is one of our senior executives at WWF South Africa. But not only that, he's one of our thought leaders around the future of South Africa. And Saliem is a very, very interesting, very dynamic, and a great leader to work with. And he'll be coming to just wrap up some of the themes, pull a bit of the themes together to respond to the question of what does WWF take away from this conference? Because we want you to know that you were heard, that this just isn't another talk shop and everything stays over here, but that we're actually going to take this ahead and we're going to take it forward and apply it to our strategy going forward. And then after that, we'll have our CEO, Dr. Morne du Plessis, who will come up and close the proceedings. So I'd like to invite Mr. Saliem Fakir.
I think I have the toughest job to try to pull a very diverse, rich, often not just environment issues, but also complex of political and economic issues. But I thought before I just summarize sort of 5 or 6 take-homes for us, because we wanted to use the conference also to listen to you, to understand your thoughts, your thinking, your concerns, and how we can take that in the work we're going to do going forward. So it's very important for us to have, most of us, you can see the senior people sitting and listening to what you've got to say, because it's easy for us to imagine the world and think that's the only way it works. So part of the challenge was to bring a diverse group of people together to also challenge our own way of thinking and to help us also to figure out the things that we really need to focus on in the future. I think it's important also to say that 7 years or 8 years ago, we were more or less a funding organization. It's fair to say we were a very conservative organization politically. We had all the wrong credentials for a post-apartheid period. And I want to use the platform to just say that, because this is our first Living Planet conference. And hopefully it will be a conference we're going to have on a regular basis based on your feedback, both negative and positive. So 8 years ago, I think there was a very concerted leadership from the board and senior management to really change the organization from the way it was characterized by the outer world. But more fundamentally, we are constantly trying to change the way we also think about environment issues in relationship to the rest of the economy. I think that's something you're going to see increasing theme being picked up. As a start of the 1st of July, we have 2 new units based on the 7-year experiment and experience. The first is the Environments Program, which is very focused on how to fix problems today. So, Shanaz, what we can do to fix the problems in functional, dysfunctional systems, whether it's business, government, also, crisis-driven labor unions, etc. And we also took a decision to focus on the future. So we have a specialized unit called the Policy Futures Unit, trying to think about issues in the next 20, 30 years. So we're trying to connect the two. Not just trying to look at the present, so trying to look at the future and how the two connect, and what can we understand about the future and the present that helps us to solve not only today's problems, but hopefully tomorrow's problems. So the Nexus issue is one of the big themes for the entire organization, probably for the next 5 years. We started this process 2 years ago, where we developed a conceptual paper, and it's wonderful to see how it's evolved and developed, both in the concept, the way we think about practice, how we link it to the economy, and more fundamentally, food, energy, water is an inescapable people's issue. Everybody of whichever color, race, sexuality, Eusebius, economic class, affected by this issue in different ways, and we got a taste of that today. Poorer people spend a lot more money on transport and food. So we don't want to just think about the environment in isolation of the economy and what is needed by our society across all walks of life. The second important point here that I think is been emphasized is that we can't think of South Africa as an island. I know our energy system is an island, but our economy is part of a regional global system. You've seen Woolworths talked about procuring not only from South Africa, but also from within the region, etc. In the future, it's likely that a lot of our energy systems are going to be integrated. If we draw on hydro, renewables, or even gas from outside of South Africa. So this is a very important thing that we probably have to work a lot on. So how do we think about local, regional, and global issues in an integrated way, and how do they influence the debate around Nexus, which is the environment, economy, and people? I think fundamentally at the local level, I think Shanaz was very, very candid about the situation. We haven't focused enough as an organization. We focus a lot on national government and provincial government. We haven't done enough around municipalities. I was a bit shocked by the situation. I thought, maybe Eastern Cape or, there's a few problems around there, but actually the crisis is, the situation is Oudtshoorn is one big example of what we hear a lot in the media, but obviously there's a lot more other municipalities that need addressing. I think this is something that where WWF needs to think about, because the Nexus issue requires very strong local government. If you want to deal with some of the environmental challenges, the food, energy issues, you have to support and strengthen local government. And one of the things we are thinking about is cities and towns and how we can deal with that, because we recognize that the future of South Africa is going to be an urbanized society, and we need to figure out how that level of urbanization can be managed very well, and the basic issues of food, water, energy is going to be the pressing issues within cities and different municipalities and towns. Christine talked about water does not come from a tap, but I would like to challenge the water team to think about the water that does come from the tap and what we do about it. It's not sufficient for WWF just to focus on the ecological hotspots, because they are part of the agenda. So we have a very big focus on protection and conservation of water, but we haven't done enough to deal with the water that comes out of the tap, the water that is flushed down the toilet, that's spewed out by industry, the dirty water that comes from the mines, and what we can do better with that. Fifthly, I think one lesson I've learned in the last couple of months is that environmentalists can be real big pessimists. They can think about the world as going to hell, and in some cases it's probably true. But increasingly, as the new unit works a lot on technology issues, we are seeing some amazing technologies that are emerging that they not have the label of environment, but they certainly solve a lot of the environmental challenges right up to the supply chain and how factories run. For instance, my team has done a lot of work on cement supply, and most people don't recognize that India and China have got one of the most efficient cement manufacturing processes in the world at the moment. And clearly there are lots of technologies out there we need to know about that we can improve and integrate into our economy, that it can improve the key challenges around resource management optimization within the supply chain. Just to emphasize that, I know Mornay talks a lot about this link between human health and well-being. It's an area I think we're trying to do some work around consumption, but also I think it's a very neat thing to try to figure out between food, energy, water nexus issues, the question of human health and well-being. More fundamentally, I think that one of the tasks of the Policy Futures Unit is also to look at the broader economy, how income is generated, how basic wages are improved, because some of the food cost issues can be absorbed if you had less problems with debt, where you had garnishee orders. Increasingly in many of the mining sectors, you'll find that workers who work in a mine, they have dependence, very high levels of dependence. Their income levels are not sufficient, and they have to go into debt. So, how relevant is that in terms of dealing with some of the issues around basic needs, where they get good supply of water, they can meet their energy requirements and their food requirements. So the distributional effects of the economy and what the economy is going to look like in the future, and increasingly making that a more sustainable feature, is something we're going to work on. What the food, energy, water nexus work also lends us to is it allows us to interact with a diverse constituency, from environmentalists to other groupings that we don't generally interact with. And it allows us to do that. You've just heard from the retail sector. I think many of you buy from Woolworths or the Spar or Checkers, but rarely do you get the insider view of what goes on. And I think that's what we can offer here in terms of bringing different groups together and understanding how their world works. So I just wanted to leave you with those few thoughts. I hope you felt very encouraged, and I would encourage you to push us and to also give us direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saliem. We have spent a lot of time in this hall today. I think we've got a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. But events like this don't happen without a lot of people behind the scenes. And so the people you see who sit and present positions from the stage are also parts of much bigger teams. In WWF, there are over 65 professionals who work on these three broad topics and biodiversity in general. So there are many, many people, and some of them in the audience here as well. We obviously very, very passionate about the work that we do. You can see that in the eyes of people who present their work and talk about things. Without passion, we won't go anywhere. But I have to acknowledge Augustine and a big team also of organizers behind him for putting this together today. We're not going to clap for that now because that takes more time. I just want to conclude by disabusing you of perhaps the perception that WWF is an organization holding a conference like this in a fairly grand venue. You'll agree that this is a fantastic venue with some seriously good food, both breakfast and lunch, as well as a fairly decent tea, that we must be rolling in it. And that is not true. This was a sponsorship. This was given to us by Sun International. Graham Stevens, the CEO, who could not be here today, personally stepped in and made this generous offer available. And so we're hugely grateful that we have friends and partners who can assist us in that sense. Of course, WWF is not a government organization. We're an NGO. So we don't get money from government. We don't sell knowledge. We're not in the consultancy business. We don't sell widgets that you can waste at home. So we don't have those tangible products that bring in income. We are significantly dependent on the support of the likes of, every single person in this room, whether you represent yourself as an individual or whether you represent a business, a corporate. And so we are hugely grateful for the support that we do get. We've had many of our corporate partners here today and also some of our individual supporters. In the back of the Panda Bulletin, which I invite you to take home with you, on the last page, inside page, there's some very pertinent suggestions. These are not comprehensive, but just some suggestions in terms of how you can support us and our work. And it's not always just giving money, but that also helps. So in closing, thank you very much for your time. This conference would not be a success without your participation, and we look forward to your feedback, as we said earlier, whichever way. We want to improve this, and we want to make sure that you also develop a tie with WWF so we can have you back at next year's Living Planet Conference. Thank you very much, and drive safely.